Hi, I'm Aurel Enriquez, and this video contains our discussion on Chapter 4 of Mahon's Diagnostic Microbiology, which focuses on the control of microorganisms. Here is the outline of our discussion. We'll first define a few terms such as sterilization, disinfection, and antiseptics. We'll then describe the way each physical agent controls the growth of microorganisms, as well as give the mechanism of action for each type of chemical agent commonly used as antiseptics and disinfectants. Let's begin with disinfection and sterilization. Super quick history muna po tayo. Let's introduce Dr. Joseph Lister. Joseph Lister is a key figure in the history of microbiology due to his pioneering work in antiseptic surgery. He applied Louis Pasteur's germ theory to surgery, significantly reducing infection rates by using carbolic acid or phenol as an antiseptic. In the 19th century, even when an operation or treatment had been successful, the patient often died from infection-related conditions like sepsis or gangrene. So no one knew the cause of infections or how they were spread, although there were many theories. So infection was the final challenge in making surgery safe. In 1864, while working at the Glasgow University as professor of surgery, Joseph Lister was introduced to Pasteur's germ theory of disease, and he decided to apply it to the problem of surgical infections. He looked for ways to prevent germs from entering a wound by creating a chemical barrier, which he called an antiseptic. Okay, kontra siya sa sepsis, all right? So between the surgical wound and the surroundings, which for this one, the chemical he chose to use was carbolic acid, which we more commonly know as phenol, and this killed the germs on contact. Let's now differentiate the terms sterilization and disinfection. When we say sterilization, this is the complete destruction of all microorganisms, including resistant structures such as bacterial spores or endospores. There are no degrees or levels of sterilization. This is an all or nothing process. 100% po dapat patay lahat ng microorganisms dun sa item or material na ini-sterilize natin. So, hindi po natin considered na sterilization kung 99.9% of germs lang ang na-eliminate natin. Kapag sinabi naman po na disinfection, this only eliminates a certain population of microorganisms. So, dito na po papasok yung statement that kills 99.9% of germs.
Removes 99.9% of germs and
not all microorganisms have been eliminated, but at least the pathogenic ones have been brought down to a number where they're no longer capable of causing pathogenicity. So yun po ang tinatawag na disinfection. Here are some other terminologies. Disinfectants are chemical agents that are usually applied to inanimate objects such as the floor, or on the countertops, your cell phones, no? Disinfectant po ang tawag natin sa mga pinanglilinis natin sa mga non-living objects or surfaces na to. Pero kapag gagamitin na po natin ito on our skin or any area on a living individual, ang tawag na po doon ay antiseptic. Let us now look into the many different factors that influence the degree of killing or yung mga factors na makakaapekto sa kung gaano ka-effective yung antiseptic or disinfectant na gagamitin natin. First is the type of organism. So different organisms have varying ability to withstand chemical and physical treatment. Some microorganisms are more resistant to others. So halimbawa po nito yung mga spore-forming bacteria, di ba po? If you would remember from our discussion on chapter 1, di ba? Special structures would include capsules, slime layers, inclusion bodies, and endospores, all right? So again, bacteria that are capable of forming spores or endospores, they are more resistant to sterilization. Another factor to consider is the total number of organisms present, which is known as the microbial load or bioburden. Okay, ulitin po natin, when we say number of organisms, what we are referring to is known as the microbial load or bioburden. In general, the greater the microbial load, the longer we have to expose the material that we are disinfecting or sterilizing to whichever agent we are using. Naintindihan po ba? Okay. So again, mas mataas ang microbial load, no? Mas marami yung bacterial cells that's present on the material, mas matagal yung kailangan na exposure to the sterilizing or disinfecting agent. Kasi it makes sense, di ba? Mas marami tayong organisms that we need to eliminate. Next is the concentration of the disinfecting agent. So the concentration of the disinfecting agent is the amount of disinfectant needed to destroy microorganisms. And nag-iiba-iba din po ito based on which disinfectant we're using. So if you would notice later on in our discussion, some of them, the best kind of like concentration would be at 75%. Some of them would require only 2% or 5%. So we'll find out. It varies depending on which disinfecting agent we're using. So it's not always true na mas mataas na concentration ng isang disinfectant ay mas mabuti. So again, we'll talk about that later. Presence of organic materials such as blood, pus, or mucus can actually affect the killing activity of disinfectants. Okay, so ulitin po natin, examples of organic materials would include blood, pus, or mucus, and they have the capability to inactivate some of those disinfectants. So, ayan po, no? Again, those organic materials, they have the capability to inactivate disinfecting agents and physically coat or cover the surface that needs to be treated, preventing full contact with the object and the agent. So, bali, hinaharangan na nga nila yung disinfectant, dinideactivate pa po nila. Okay? Next is the nature of the surface to be disinfected. The nature of the surface to be disinfected, for this one, what we need to remember is that certain medical instruments are manufactured or made out of biomaterials or other materials that are quite sensitive to extreme temperatures or they're sensitive to some chemicals, right? So if we attempt to disinfect or sterilize them, then this could cause possible damage to those instruments. So before we proceed to disinfect or sterilize some equipment in the laboratory, alamin po muna natin what they are made of and ano po yung tamang way of disinfecting them or kung disposable ba sila. Alright? Let's proceed to the next column right here. Okay? As for the contact time, this is otherwise referred to as the exposure time. The amount of time a disinfectant or sterilant is in contact with the object is very important. So again, as we proceed to the next few slides, we will be able to learn that some of them require different contact times. Yung iba mas matagal, yung iba sa kanila, they could work as fast as 30 seconds to 1 minute, right? So not enough contact time will not allow the agent to work properly. With regards to temperature, disinfectants are generally used at a room temperature. All right, so at room temperature, their activity is somehow increased to some degree by an increased temperature and decreased by a drop in temperature. Okay, ulitin po natin yung statement na yun, no? Karamihan po ng mga disinfectants, they work best at room temperature. Okay? Pero kung gagamitin po nila, or kung gagamitin natin itong mga to at surfaces that have a slightly higher temperature, then somehow, no, there could be an increase in their effectiveness. But we would also be able to observe that in colder temperatures, their effectiveness would also drop. Okay? Up next is pH. So another factor to consider is pH. May mga disinfectants din po kasi that have been manufactured to be active or to be more effective at a certain pH, whether it be acidic, neutral, or alkaline. Next are biofilms. So biofilms are communities of bacteria in layers that often have a protective material over them. that protects them from the outside environment. Okay? So, ayun po, no, biofilm producers are common among microorganisms that could be found in hospitals or yung mga bacteria po na kayang magdulot ng nosocomial and hospital-acquired infections. So these biofilms, they can cling on to catheters and other prosthetic materials used on patients. And pwede rin po silang makita sa mga water pipes na hindi laging nalilinis. Okay, so bacteria that can form biofilms together usually need longer contact time and greater concentration of disinfectant for us to successfully get rid of them. Kasi nga po, they are more resistant. They're being protected by their biofilms. Lastly, we should also consider the capability of disinfectants. All right, so it's not all, or compatibility, sorry. We should consider the compatibility of disinfectants. It's not always correct that two disinfectants are better than one. All right, so some disinfectants may actually inactivate or cancel out the effectiveness of other disinfectants when used together. So, iiwasan po natin yung paghahalo-halo ng magkakaibang mga chemical agents or disinfectants. Kasi ayun nga po, minsan, this might cancel out their capabilities or hindi na ito magiging effective kung hinaluan nyo sila ng iba pang disinfectant. Let's now find out what are the different methods of disinfection and sterilization. First are physical methods, which includes heating, filtration, and radiation. So, unahin po muna natin ang paggamit ng heat. There are also different methods on how we could utilize heat to sterilize or disinfect different objects. Let's start with moist heat, otherwise known as heat under pressure, which is achieved with the use of an autoclave. Alright, so pag nag-autoclave po tayo ng mga materials, we're making use of moist heat. All right. So this is putting steam under 15 psi or pounds per square inch. All right, which can achieve a temperature of 21 degrees Celsius. So this photo on the left shows us different examples of an autoclave. All right. So yung ginagamit po namin dati na autoclave dun sa dating clinic where I used to work at, meron po siyang tray where you have to fill it out with water. Alright? Tapos, meron siyang designated compartment sa loob ng machine. Alright? And then, with the help of pressure, iinit po yung tubig. Okay? So, this will create steam and eventually sterilize everything inside. Okay? So, hindi umiinit yung tubig because of another heat source. Okay? Umiinit yung tubig because of the pressure. And after about 15 minutes, this should be able to kill all microorganisms on the materials that you have placed inside. So, after nung process na yon, hindi nyo rin po pwedeng basta buksan agad yung autoclave. There's a knob somewhere on top of that machine that you have to twist open to release all of the pressure for a few minutes bago nyo po buksan. If you don't do that, at diretso nyo pong binuksan yung autoclave, all the pressure and heat inside could explode right onto your face. Okay, so mag-iingat po. Next is dry heat. It requires much longer exposure times and higher temperatures compared to moist heat. Kaya mas madalas po, autoclave na lang yung preferred. This is commonly used to sterilize glassware, and an example of this is incineration or burning. Okay, ulitin po natin, incineration or burning is an example of dry heat. Dito, hindi na po natin kailangan ng water source. Hindi na natin kailangan mag-create ng steam. Okay, so that's the difference between moist heat and dry heat. Boiling and pasteurization are both methods that achieve disinfection but not sterilization. Okay, ulitin po natin. Itong mga nasa slide na to, they're only capable of disinfection, not sterilization. So these methods cannot eliminate bacterial spores. So ano pong nabanggit ko kanina about sterilization? This is an all or nothing process, di ba po? 100% elimination of all microorganisms. So kung may natitirang spores, that's not sterilization. Okay? So boiling kills most organisms at 100 degrees Celsius, for about 10 minutes. Okay, ganun po dapat katagal. If less than 10 minutes, boiling might not be very effective. If greater than 10 minutes, maaari pong maapektuhan na nito yung integrity ng material that we're boiling. Alright? As for pasteurization, this is usually practiced in the food industry. It can disinfect the food items. It could also kill foodborne pathogens that can cause spoilage, but it will not affect its taste. Okay? So yun po yung magandang bagay tungkol sa pasteurization, no? It could disinfect the food item but not ruin its taste. Alright? So kadalasan po sa mga milk and dairy products po, pine-perform ang pasteurization. Special thanks to Sir Louis Pasteur, diba? Louis Pasteur is the French microbiologist who proposed the use of heat in killing microorganisms, which is now generally referred to as the aseptic technique. All right? So, if for example, bumili kayo ng milk or yogurt from the market, no? If you check the packaging, you might be able to see na sa label niya nakalagay po UHT or ultra high temperature treated yung material or yung food item na binili nyo. So again, that's a form of pasteurization. Still on the physical methods, we have filtration. Filtration methods may be used for both liquid and air. Okay? So ulitin po natin ang mga materials or ang mga ayun nga po, specific items na kumbaga is gusto nating i-disinfect, no? Using filtration could either be the air or liquid materials. All right. So filtration of air is accomplished with the use of high efficiency particulate air or HEPA filters. All right. So HEPA filters are able to remove microorganisms larger than 0.3 micrometers and are used in laboratory hoods and in rooms of immunocompromised patients. For filtration of liquids, this is accomplished through the use of thin membrane filters composed of plastic polymers or cellulose esters containing pores of a certain size. So kung kanina po sa air filtration, standard na 0.3 micrometers yung pore size for HEPA filters. Dito po, mag-iiba-iba yung pore sizes depending on the organisms that we would like to eliminate. All right. So for this one, the liquid is pulled using a vacuum system or pwede rin naman pong baliktad. It could be pushed using pressure through the filter matrix. All right. So padadaanin po yung liquid na kailangan i-disinfect doon sa mga membrane, and any particle or microorganism larger than the pore size gets trapped and removed from the liquid. So listed here are the specific pore size requirements for the filtration of specific organisms. Still on the physical methods, radiation. Radiation may be used in two forms, ionizing and non-ionizing. Ionizing radiation in the form of gamma rays or electron beams would produce short wavelength but high energy. Now, this method of sterilization is used by the medical field for the sterilization of disposable supplies such as syringes, catheters, and gloves. Yung mga medical supplies po that are labeled as single-use or disposable, tapos nakalagay po sila sa mga individual packaging, usually po, no, ionizing radiation, yung method by which those items were sterilized. Next is non-ionizing radiation in the form of ultraviolet rays, which are long wavelength but low energy. Now, because of its poor penetrability and usefulness of non-ionizing radiation, this is limited. Okay, ulitin po natin, the usefulness of non-ionizing radiation is limited. Mas ginagamit po sa mga medical supplies yung ionizing radiation. So again, sa anong wavelength or anong type of radiation ang ionizing? It's the gamma rays. Anong type of radiation ang non-ionizing? It's the ultraviolet rays. There are some biosafety cabinets or fume hoods out there na meron po silang switch at kasama sa function nila ang pagkakaroon ng ultraviolet light source. Okay, so that's just an additional feature for some biosafety cabinets. Okay, but again, those ultraviolet light or ultraviolet rays, no, they are referred to as non-ionizing radiation. Let us now move on to the chemical methods. Sa chemical methods po, gumagamit tayo ng disinfectants or antiseptics. So, tignan po natin dito what are the different types of disinfectants or antiseptics. Okay? So, dito po hindi na natin i-discuss lahat ng bawat isang klase ng disinfectants and antiseptics available out there. Only those that are used in the medical field, no, or in for medical purposes. Okay? Kilala na po nating lahat ito. First up are alcohols, whether it be ethyl or isopropyl. Their mode of action is to denature proteins and dissolve lipid membranes, which is why nakakadry ng kamay yung palaging pag-aalcohol because it can dissolve oils or lipids on our skin. But as you can see right here in these examples, not sponsored, commercially available alcohols, no, they're already incorporated with moisturizer, so they don't dry out our skin. Alcohols can be used as both antiseptic or disinfectant. So, pwede natin gamitin sa skin and also on inanimate surfaces. It is recommended that the concentration would be at 60 to 90%. Okay, so ito na po yung nabanggit ko kanina, di ba? That higher concentrations of disinfectants doesn't always mean that it's better. In the case of alcohol, it needs about 30 seconds up to 1 minute of contact time for it to be able to kill the microorganisms present. Pero kapag masyadong mataas po yung alcohol content, such as the 95 or 99% alcohol, magiging mas mabilis po yung evaporation ng alcohol, which would give it a shorter amount of time for it to work. So basically, kapag sobrang taas nung concentration ng alcohol, mas mabilis siyang mag-evaporate and hindi niya mapufulfill yung correct contact time. Okay? On the other hand, kapag masyado naman pong mababa, tulad ng mga 40% alcohol, hindi rin po ito magiging effective because there's not enough alcohol molecules to interact with the microorganisms. So might just well rub your hands with plain water because they're both kind of useless. If you ever feel useless, always remember that 40% alcohol exists. Aldehydes act by inactivating proteins and nucleic acids and are typically used on medical instruments. Okay, ulitin po natin. For medical instruments po ang aldehydes, hindi for skin or living tissues. Alright? So, by definition, ano po ang tawag natin sa aldehydes? These are disinfectants, di ba po? Because kapag pwede na siyang gamitin sa skin or living tissues, ang tawag na po doon ay antiseptics. Alright? So again, aldehydes are commonly used to sterilize medical instrument. First up is formaldehyde or 8% formaldehyde. This is generally used as formalin in an aqueous solution. Its usefulness, however, is limited since it has an irritability factor and it is a known carcinogen. Okay, so constant exposure to formaldehyde could possibly cause cancer. Di ba po? So if you've ever had classes like general biology or anatomy and physiology where you had to work with dead animals like frogs or cats that are preserved in formalin, di ba po? Masakit sa mata, di ba? And also sa ilong kasi di ba kailangan laging naka-face mask tayo when handling those things that are preserved in formalin because it can cause irritation. Okay, so ulitin po natin, constant unprotected exposure to formalin could lead to cancer. Next is 2% glutaraldehyde. Glutaraldehyde naman po. This could be used against a lot of organisms like Pseudomonas, Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and even fungal and viral pathogens. So upon 10 minutes of contact time with 2% glutaraldehyde, this can be effective against viruses like HIV or hepatitis B. Kung i-extend pa po natin yung exposure time to 3 until 10 hours, 2% glutaraldehyde can even kill spores, which is why we have the term right here. It says sporicidal. Next are halogens, specifically iodine. It can be used in two forms, tincture of iodine or iodophore. So tincture of iodine, ito po yung kilala natin basically as betadine. Okay, not sponsored. This is basically an alcohol plus iodine solution, mainly used as an antiseptic, either to clean wounds or prep the skin before blood collection. So ulitin po natin, no, for the skin, alright, ginagamit ang iodine. So ang ibig sabihin, this is an antiseptic. Okay, hindi po pwedeng gamitin disinfectant ang iodine because it has the capability to stain surfaces. Okay, magiiwan ito ng parang yellowish brown color. Alright, so again, do not use this on surfaces. This is used for the skin. So again, we have right here tincture of iodine, which is a combination of alcohol and iodine solution. We have another one, which is iodophore. So ang iodophore naman po, no, iodophore is iodine plus a neutral polymer that's supposed to increase solubility. But again, ang mas madalas po natin gamitin is yung tincture. So the contact time for this to be effective is about 30 seconds or longer. Chlorine and chlorine compounds are some of the oldest and most commonly used disinfectants. They are usually used in the form of hypochlorite, such as liquid sodium hypochlorite, which we all know as household bleach, commonly used as a surface disinfectant. Di ba po? Pang-mop ng sahig, panglinis ng workstations. Their killing activity is based on the oxidative effects of hypochlorous acid formed when chloride ions are dissolved in water, which is why the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommends a 1:10 dilution. Okay, so 1 part bleach, 10 parts water. Mas marami po yung water kesa bleach. Okay? So, kadalasan po hindi natin diretsong binubuhos sa mga items yung bleach. We mix it with water. Pure bleach is corrosive, therefore concentrated bleach solutions should not be used for disinfection. Alright? So, wag pong kakalimutan yun, no? The recommended CDC dilution for bleach is 1 part bleach, 10 parts water. Up next are quaternary ammonium compounds, or quats, which we more commonly know as detergents. So quaternary ammonium compounds work by reducing the surface tension of molecules in a liquid. They could disrupt the cellular membrane or bacterial cells, resulting in the leakage of the cell contents. Alright, so sisirain daw po nila yung cell membrane para lahat ng components on the inside of the cell would move to the outside, ultimately destroying the bacterial cell. Ang limitation sa usage po nito is disinfectant lang po sila. Okay? So only for non-living surfaces. At hindi po pwedeng gamitin ang mga quats as an antiseptic. Phenolics are molecules of phenol, also known as carbolic acid, that have been chemically substituted by alkyl, phenyl, or benzyl groups, which, to simplify, binago po nila yung structure ng carbolic acid to increase effectiveness and reduce toxicity. First on the list is chlorhexidine gluconate, or CHG, which in 1972 was approved by the FDA as a topical antiseptic. It's safe, non-toxic, and not absorbed through the skin, and this is also less likely to cause irritations. Broad spectrum din po ang chlorhexidine gluconate, so it could work against both gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. Other examples of phenolics include hexachlorophene, chlorosilanol, and triclosan. Medyo kilala din po ang triclosan because this is usually an active ingredient in toothpaste, which became kind of like a controversial topic in the past. Okay? Kasi po, as we can see right here, no, exposure to large amounts leads to decreased thyroid hormone levels. So people who did not understand that there were certain percentages that were allowed to be included in toothpaste were kind of like worried or alarmed na lahat ng toothpaste na may triclosan ay magdudulot ng decreased thyroid hormone levels, which is not correct because um, toothpaste and other products like that, they usually have a limit of 0.3% concentration of triclosan. So, para po yun sa mga toothpaste, hand soap, body soap, shower gel, and even in deodorants. That is considered safe. Okay? So again, in the usual products like toothpaste and soaps, no, ang limit po is 0.3%. That is still considered safe and will not lead to any effects on hormone levels. Pero you would be able to observe these negative effects only if a person is exposed constantly to large amount of triclosan. Disinfectants containing heavy metals are rarely used because safer and more effective compounds are more preferred. They're primarily bacteriostatic, meaning it can only inhibit bacterial growth but does not totally kill the bacteria. Ulitin po natin kapag sinabing bacteriostatic, pinipigilan niya lang po yung further multiplication ng bacteria. Pero hindi niya direktang pinapatay yung bacteria. Pinipigilan niya lang sila na mag-grow. Kapag sinabi naman po natin na bactericidal, it will straight up kill the bacteria. Okay, so again, heavy metal compounds are generally just bacteriostatic. In the past, Ophthalmia neonatorum, Ophthalmia neonatorum, which is an eye infection caused by Neisseria gonorrhoeae, used to make use of silver nitrate eye drops as a prophylaxis. Okay, so Neisseria gonorrhoeae is a sexually transmitted bacteria that could cause gonorrhea. So for women po, specifically for pregnant women, when these bacterial cells of Neisseria gonorrhoeae infect their genitourinary tract, they could also cling on to the surface of the yung vaginal canal or yung birth canal, no? So these bacteria, they have the adhesive pili, which is basically a cell attachment for better adhesion. Now, if for example, a baby passes through this infected birth canal, these bacterial cells have the capability to stick on or cling to the mucosal surfaces of the eyes of the newborn baby. So, kung alam na, no, clinically diagnosed na with a Neisseria gonorrhoeae infection, itong pregnant woman na to, they would usually administer prophylaxis to the child in the form of eye drops. So before the eye infection would even begin, they already administer, yun nga po, yung prophylaxis, which in the past is made of 1% silver nitrate. But nowadays, this has been replaced by erythromycin eye drops. Up next, we also have copper alloys used as solid surface antimicrobials. What do we mean when we say solid surface antimicrobial? A solid surface antimicrobial is a non-porous, man-made material often used in the construction of countertops and other surfaces that incorporates antimicrobial properties to inhibit the growth of microorganisms like bacteria and mold. So, ginagamit po sila by constructing surfaces na pag dumikit po sa mga surface na ito yung bacteria, mamamatay sila. Okay? So, kabaliktaran po ito ng mga disinfectants na na-discuss natin in the previous slides. Yung ibang disinfectants po, like bleach for example, ipapamunas mo yon sa surface na nililinis mo para ma-eliminate yung bacteria. Dito po, yung bacteria, yung didikit doon sa copper alloy surface, tapos tsaka po sila mamamatay. Okay? So I hope you understood what it means when we say solid surface antimicrobial. This illustration shows us how copper kills bacteria. In moderation, copper is actually an essential nutrient for bacterial organisms. Kailangan din naman po ng bacteria ang copper in small amounts for proper growth and function. So yung cell walls po nila, it readily allows the entry of copper molecules. Okay? So here's the problem. Their cell walls, the bacterial cell walls, don't have a mechanism to actually regulate the amount of copper ions that is coming in. So when there is excessive amounts of copper that has entered the cell, this becomes toxic to the bacteria. So once the amount of copper ions reaches the lethal dose, it begins to disrupt metabolic processes and could even cause damage to bacterial DNA. Next are a gas sterilant. Ethylene oxide is the most commonly used gas for sterilization. Ethylene oxide is explosive in its pure form, so it has to be combined with nitrogen or carbon dioxide before use. Gas sterilization is used in hospitals for materials that cannot withstand steam sterilization. So yung mga gamit daw po sa ibang hospital na sensitive sa moisture at sensitive sa high temperature, pwede pong gamitan ng ethylene oxide. However, its use has declined in the past few decades due to health concerns because chronic inhalation of ethylene oxide has been found to cause cancer. Okay, so neurotoxicity and cancer. Ulitin po natin, constant exposure to ethylene oxide could lead to neurotoxicity and cancer. Carcinogenic hazard po ang ethylene oxide. Next, we also have other gas sterilants such as hydrogen peroxide, peracetic acid, and a combination of these two. So as you can see right here, these ones are considered as a corrosive hazard. That ends our discussion on Chapter 4 of Mayhon, which focuses on the control of microorganisms. However, this video doesn't end here. Meron pa po tayong bonus topic. This segment contains our discussion on Chapter 2 of the lab manual that we use, which is the fundamental practices in clinical microbiology. Here is the outline of our discussion.
So, let's just have a quick history lesson po, no? History muna tayo. So, nung unang panahon po, yung panahon na wala pang masyadong scientific advancements within the 15th century, people were convinced that certain living things emerged from non-living things or decomposing matter. So, this belief was known as the spontaneous generation or abiogenesis. So, like magic, imagine pulling a rabbit out of a hat. People thought that it was possible to have nothing and then out of thin air, a living being would suddenly spawn out. So, thankfully, this theory was later on disproved by an experiment conducted by Italian physician Francesco Redi, where he got three glass jars and placed meat inside of them. So, one jar was left fully open, the next one was covered, but only with gauze, and then the other one was tightly sealed. Okay, so dun po sa tightly sealed jar, no maggots were observed even after the meat was rotting or after the meat has spoiled. Dun po sa jar na gauze lang yung takip, when the meat spoiled, it attracted flies, but since meron nga po nakaharang na gauze, they laid their eggs only on top of the gauze. So wala pong maggots na nag-develop dun sa mismong rotting meat. Dun sa jar that was completely open, the flies were able to swarm on the meat, lay eggs, and produce maggots. So through this experiment, people learned na, oh, okay, so maggots don't just spawn out of thin air. So yun po, no, nalaman nila that flies, no, living flies, give birth to the maggots. Alright? So ayun po. And dito na po nasimulan yung paniniwala sa biogenesis, which states that living things come from other living things through reproduction. So, this is a list of scientists who provided evidence of biogenesis. May iba pa pong mga scientists that conducted their own experiments. And ayun nga po, no, this would include Francesco Redi, Louis Hoblot, Franz Schulz, and Theodore Swan, and also Louis Pasteur. So on the next slide, focus po tayo sa experiments nila Francesco Redi and Louis Pasteur. These illustrations right here shows us a visual representation of the experiments that were conducted by Francesco Redi in 1688 and by Louis Pasteur in 1859. So as explained in the previous slide, Dito po, no, there are three different jars and there were meat inside of them. So they were left out in the open and eventually the meat started to spoil. All right. So eventually in the open jar, flies were able to come in contact with the rotting meat and they laid eggs. And out of out of those eggs, no, we were able to observe the presence of maggots. Next, we have the tightly sealed jar. So even after the meat was already spoiled or rotting, the flies were not able to come in contact with the rotting meat. So there were no maggots that were observed. And lastly, on the jar that was covered with only a cloth netting or a gauze, we were able to observe that the flies were attracted to the rotting meat, but they were not able to come in contact with the rotting meat. So when they laid eggs, all the maggots were only observed on top of the gauze. All right. Up next is from Louis Pasteur. So as we can see right here, he made use of a swan neck flask. All right. So kung nakikita po natin dito in this photo, he had a Florence flask, which had an elongated opening, as we can see right here. And then on the inside, there is a broth. All right. So dito po, the broth was boiled to kill microorganisms. Di ba po, in our previous discussion, boiling is a form of disinfection. Di ba po? So as we can see right here, in this first flask that was still attached, no, it still had the swan neck attached to it. The opening was quite far away from the actual broth. And if you can see right here, pwede pa po nating i-block yung daanan with a bit more fluid. So talagang walang air from the outside that is coming to the inside of the flask. And therefore, after leaving this broth in the open for some time, no contamination happened. Kasi nga po, the contaminants that's present in the air was not able to come in contact with the broth that is inside of the flask. Let's compare that to this other one right here, where we could see na on the next step, tinanggal niya po yung flask, 'di ba? Tinanggal niya yung elongated na opening. So the outside air, which is assumed to be contaminated with bacteria, fungi, and other stuff like that, was more easily able to come inside of the flask and contaminate the broth. So even after boiling the broth, nung tinanggal po yung elongated na opening or yung swan neck nung flask, eventually, no, other microorganisms were able to grow or other contaminants were observed within the flask. All right. So ayan po, no. That was the experiment that was conducted by Louis Pasteur using a swan neck flask. So again, both these experiments were able to show us that if this specific material doesn't come in contact with any contaminants and any other living materials, then we won't be able to observe any contaminants or other living organisms growing in this material. But if we expose it to the open air, kung saan it could come into contact with insects, bacteria, or fungi that's present in the air, then eventually we would be able to observe that those organisms are also present on the material that we left out in the open. Okay, so again, this was able to prove the theory of biogenesis. Listed here are other significant events in microbiology and public health. During the 19th century, women died during childbirth due to Streptococcus pyogenes infections. At dahil dito, natutunan po ng mga tao na dapat pala naghuhugas tayo ng kamay para hindi natin mapasa yung infection sa susunod na pasyente. No? So, nung 19th century pa lang po nila na-realize yung importance of hand washing. During the 1950s, hospital-acquired infections were on the rise, specifically that of which that was caused by Staphylococcus aureus. In 2003, influenza A H1N1 became a global concern, and its ability to cause severe acute respiratory disease or SARS. Okay, so ulitin po natin, ang pathogen dito ay yung influenza A H1N1. Ang disease associated ay yung SARS or severe acute respiratory syndrome. Up next, in 2019, ayan po, no, we were able to experience the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. All right. So dito po, SARS-CoV-2 is the causative agent of COVID-19. All right. So ulitin po natin, ang pathogen is the SARS-CoV-2. SARS-CoV-2 stands for Severe Acute Respiratory Syndrome Coronavirus 2. Okay. Tapos yung disease associated po is COVID-19. Okay? Let's now discuss the different types of biosafety cabinets. BSC Class 1 offers the least degree of biologic containment. Unsterilized air from the room can pass through the cabinet and may potentially, no, potentially contaminate everything that's inside of it. It does, however, sterilize the air that it exhausts. So, kung contaminated man po yung hangin galing sa labas, once it passes through the BSC1, filtered na po ito paglabas. All right? So if you're processing anything pathogenic inside of the cabinet, it's at least not letting it back out into the room. All right? So that is for the biological safety cabinet class 1. BSC Class 2 has two different types. Parehas po nilang filter yung hangin na galing sa room. Okay, so kung may contaminating agent man po sa room, no, um, na galing sa labas ng cabinet, it at least will not contaminate your samples as we can see right here. So kapag may nakita po kayong mga bars na color blue dito sa illustration natin, that is a form of filter. So again, if we look right here, labeled as A, papasok po yung air dito, but it will be filtered, dadaan sa F, pupunta sa E, aandar siya papunta dito sa D, and pagdating dito sa D, filtered na po yung air. So what would happen here is hindi na kinokontaminate ng room air yung mga samples na pinaprocess mo po dito. And as we can see right here on letter C, it would eventually recirculate 70% of the air. But again, na-filter na po ang hangin na yun. Alright? Ang pinagkaiba lang po ng Class 2A, no, which is this one, yung una nating diniscuss, again, it will recirculate 70% of the room air that went into the cabinet. Pero ang Class 2B, it has a special structure that is attached to the building. So pagkatapos nyo pong i-filter yung hangin galing sa room, it will discharge the exhaust air to the outside of the building. Hindi na niya i-recirculate pabalik ng room where you're working in. Okay? So again, that's the two types of BSC Class 2. A biological safety cabinet class 3 provides the highest level of containment. Class 3 is completely enclosed, as we can see right here in this illustration. And for you to be able to bring your specimen to the inside of a cabinet, kailangan nyo pong idaan dito sa double-ended pass-through box, which is labeled as letter E. Okay? So dyan po, it has double doors. Okay? So para po kahit buksan nyo yan from the outside, may isa pa pong pinto sa looban so that the air from the cabinet won't escape through that box. All right. Now to access the inside, you have to use the glove ports, which are labeled as letter A dito and ito po. All right. So you would still wear your gloves that you usually wear when you use your complete PPE. Then ilalagay niyo po yung arm niyo dito to be able to access the inside. So from the inside, bubuksan niyo po yung isa pang door dun sa letter E, as you can see here in this illustration. So may access ka sa letter E from the outside, pero may access ka rin sa letter E from the inside. So again, those are the double-doored pass-through box. Okay? So ayan po. This one, ulitin po natin, provides the highest level of protection. It is completely enclosed, so it has the best level of containment. So this is for BSC Class 3. Let's now differentiate the four biosafety levels. Kung kanina po we were talking about biosafety cabinet, ito naman po biosafety levels. So do not be confused, okay, when we're talking about biosafety cabinets, these are actual equipments that is located inside of the laboratory. But when we say biosafety levels, these are specific requirements, and these would include the specific types of pathologic agents that we are allowed or we are capable of processing in the laboratory. Okay, so first one is BSL or Biosafety Level 1, which has been labeled as minimal hazard. So BSL1 is for working with organisms that have no known potential to infect healthy people, such as Bacillus subtilis. Pero as with all laboratories, bawal pa rin pong kumain, uminom, mag-smoke or mag-vape dito. Okay? And of course, you still have to be wearing your basic PPE. At the biosafety level 2, this has been labeled as moderate hazard. So ito na po yung usual na ginagamit natin, no? And this is the usual biosafety level that we would be working in. This is where we process common infectious or pathogenic organisms isolated from clinical samples or yung mga pathogens that we could acquire from patient samples. Okay. Up next is biosafety level 3, which deals with pathogens not commonly encountered in the clinical laboratory. So this has been labeled as a serious or potential lethal hazard. All right. So this would include potential bioterrorism agents or other pathogens that are airborne. Okay. So mahalaga din po yun. If you are to process patient samples that may contain pathogens that could be acquired via inhalation, then you need to be in a biosafety level 3 setup. All right. So, ayan po. Again, for airborne pathogens, no, BSL-3 facilities should have double HEPA filters and can incinerate materials as needed. So most likely, dito na rin po sila gumagamit ng BSC or Biosafety Cabinet Class 3. So according to CDC, processing of Mycobacterium tuberculosis and SARS-CoV-2 specimens should be done in a BSC-3 lab. Last one is BSL-4. So ito na po yung pinakaseryoso sa kanilang lahat. This deals with 100% lethal pathogens with no available treatment, no available vaccines, such as the Ebola virus. So limited personnel lang po ang may access to enter the BSL-4 laboratory, and anything or anyone that exits this lab should undergo decontamination. So dito po, seryoso, ang ginagamit nila dito ay yung biosafety cabinet na number 3. Okay? Biosafety cabinet class 3. Yung completely enclosed, may double-ended pass-through box, tapos may hiwalay pa na glove port. So, ayun po. That is one of the requirements, no, for biosafety level 4. Here are the references that were used in the making of this discussion. That ends our discussion on Chapter 4 of Mahon's textbook of Diagnostic Microbiology, which focuses on the control of microorganisms, plus Chapter 2 of the Fundamental Practices in Clinical Microbiology, which talks about infection control. This has been Aurel Enriquez. Thank you so much for watching.